Hey guys, it's Karl, and with the release of the new iPads, namely the entry-level iPad as well as the iPad mini, this is the entire iPad line currently in 2021, and this video will kind of pick which one I think is the best one to get, kind of compare some of the differences between them. And like I said, we have the entry-level, the mini, the older now iPad Air, and the most expensive iPad Pro. So maybe we'll start off with the cheapest and kind of work our way down the board. Let's kick things off with the entry-level. So this iPad is labeled by Apple as the most popular iPad, and that's just because of the amount of units sold, and that's solely because of the price point. So they still haven't changed that. It comes in at $329, and they've actually upgraded a couple internals to make it a bit more enticing. So they've now doubled the storage. We are thankfully gone with 32 gigs. The baseline storage option is 64, which I think is possible to get by with. Last year's model with 32 gigs just wasn't cutting it, and I always recommended to upgrade to at least 64. I think you can get by, like I said, if you're just downloading basic stuff. You're obviously not storing 4K footage on here. You're not storing thousands and thousands of high-def photos, HDR photos. For your basic iPad experience and you're not a pro, and if you are, you'd probably be eyeing some of the other devices, 64 gigs is more than enough for most basic apps that you're running on it. You can see on the back, it's got the very classic Apple design. This still comes in the two color options, either space gray or silver. And if you do get cellular, it still has this black band as the antenna. Flipping the device around, this is where the entry-level iPad looks super dated. So it still has the OG iPad design. I think this is one of the first designs they've had. So it's been kicking around for 5 to 6 years. It honestly is dated. You really see that with the bezels, and I can get by with these side chunky bezels, that's fine. It's just the unwieldy forehead. Even with the front-facing camera that's been improved, Apple could easily shave off almost a couple centimeters in my opinion. And at the bottom, I get it, you still have Touch ID. This is the only iPad in the entire line that still offers that classic button support. So if you're a die-hard Touch ID fan, you need something to press button-wise, I totally get it. Just keep in mind that the Mini and the Air also have Touch ID. It's just located on the on and off button. In terms of the Retina display, it's 10.2 inches. They have added True Tone this year, so that adjusts depending on the temperature of the light that's coming in. So that should help with reading the iPad at night. You won't have as much blue light, so it will help your eyes. It isn't the sharpest display. Of course, it's still 60 Hertz. Only the iPad Pro gets Pro Motion, which is 120 Hertz. In no means is it a bad display, and compared to most tablets out there, it can still hold its own, but really when you kind of compare it to, say, the Mini, the Air, especially the iPad Pro, if you have them side by side, you'll really notice a difference. Internally, we've also got a spec increase for the silicone, so it's the A13 Bionic, and that was found on the iPhone 11/11 Pro. And in no means is that a bad chip. I'm sure a lot of you watching this video still have your iPhone 11. It still works totally fine. So when you're kind of multitasking, when you're playing games, when you're running most apps on your iPad, it still performs great. And unless you've got devices side by side, speed-wise, I really wouldn't be too concerned with its overall performance. Camera-wise, we've only got an upgrade coming to the front-facing sensor on the iPad, so it's the 12 megapixel ultra-wide, and it does support center stage. So if you use this a lot for FaceTime, which I think the entry-level iPad is great for, you've got that feature, but on the back, we've still got the same 8 megapixel sensor. It just takes pretty soft photos, still a bit blurry. I'm still not a fan of people taking overall photos with their iPads. I still think it looks a tad bit weird, but for, I guess, a basic point and shoot, if you are that tourist, Mom, that's you. I've seen you multiple times when we were on the Philippines. I'll never forget, she was using her iPad as a camera. You can get by. Accessory-wise, I believe this is new to this iPad. You now have the option to pair it with the first-gen Apple Pencil. So just like the Touch ID button on the front, this is the only iPad that still supports the older Apple Pencil. So you still have that weird way to charge it. You still need to stick it into the bottom. And I know the second-gen Apple Pencil is slightly faster, a bit more responsive, but for the basic things that I do, so the occasional drawing, jotting down notes on PDFs, there isn't too much of a difference. It's more of the fact that it doesn't snap to the iPad. You still have to charge it weirdly. That's the biggest differences for me for using the first-gen Apple Pencil, so I don't think that should be a deal breaker. And overall, I still think the entry-level iPad is a solid option to pick if you don't care about the design, if you don't care about how dated it looks, if you want to get an iPad to get into the iPad or tablet space and you don't want to spend too much money, $329, and you'll see when we get to some of the more expensive models, that's pretty solid, to be honest. Still personally not my recommended one because I am a bit of a techie. I do like some of the newer features of the other ones, which is where we're gonna get to, which I guess is the perfect segue into the new iPad mini. So you can think of this like a smaller version, a mini, of the iPad Air. They're essentially the same thing in terms of design. So when you look at it, it's got this new design refresh, which I honestly love. This one comes in 4 different colors. This specific one is in Starlight, but it also comes in pink, which you can think of as rose gold, space gray, as well as the new purple. And I've currently got all of those on order, so I'll do a full unboxing color comparison, so make sure you do check that out. But the thing I love about the mini, you can kind of see it in my hand here, I can hold the mini easily with one hand compared to any of the other iPads. You do need to, unfortunately, use it with 2. Obviously with this, you're holding it with one hand, interacting with one, but for say the OG iPad, I cannot palm this unless you've got Shaq-sized hands. It's just not possible. You need to kind of hold it like this, like an actual notebook or a magazine. If you're eyeing the Mini or the Air, the biggest question should be, which size do you like? And I think once you've nailed down that question, that helps you pick which device you want. So 8.3 inches over on the Mini compared to the 10.9 found on the iPad Air. Like I said, for design-wise, these are pretty much identical. So these are the iPads that both have Touch ID on the on and off button. The iPad Pro only has Face ID, and maybe some of the minor physical differences because of the Mini size, you can actually see up top, the Mini has the volume rocker as well as the on and off button up top, as opposed to the iPad Air, which has the on and off button up top and the volume rocker on the right-hand side. The Mini starts at $500, and once again, 64 gig storage. That's kind of the baseline across all models now, and the iPad Air starts at $600, so it's only a $100 increase from the screen size. Both charge via USB-C, both have that 12 megapixel camera on the back, and I think the iPad mini looks a tad bit better taking photos wise. This isn't as unwieldy. It doesn't look as strange. If you're snapping photos with this, I still probably wouldn't condone it the most, but I honestly think that's just me being a bit strange. And they both have that same 12 megapixel ultra wide camera up front. So of course they both have center stage. They both take half decent selfies. And they both have the updated displays with the shrunk down bezels. And really when you compare this to the OG iPad Air, that's really where you can see how dated the entry-level iPad looks. One little spec difference between the Mini, which actually trumps the iPad Air, is actually the silicone. So this is running the A15 Bionic, which is found in the brand new iPhone 13, 13 Pro, those videos coming soon. Whereas the iPad Air, which is almost a year old now, has the older iPhone 12's A14 Bionic. Have I noticed a difference in performance? Honestly, absolutely not. I think you might see those numbers on Geekbench, but in day-to-day stuff, there really isn't anything I can notice between both of these devices. They're both lightning quick, and in all honesty, they compare very well to the M1 iPad Pros. Because we have USB-C on both devices, they do support the 2nd gen Apple Pencil. I think this is one of the big key differences. If you use the Apple Pencil a lot, you'll be attracted to these devices more. You don't have to kind of stick the Apple Pencil in a weird place. You know where it is. It snaps onto the side of both the Mini as well as the Air. And like I said initially, the only way you're gonna decide between both of these is the form factor, is the size of the display. So once you've kind of picked that, I'm personally leaning towards the Mini. And I've said previously, I think the iPad Air is the best iPad to get. It isn't as expensive as the Pro. It pretty much performs the same. I love the form factor of the Mini. I truly think I could use this more. I still find iPads a tad bit weird for me because I mainly use my laptop mostly to edit these YouTube videos. I'm on Final Cut Pro all the time. There still isn't an app where I can efficiently edit video as quickly on, say, my MacBook Air, as I can on an iPad. Even on the M1 iPad, I still struggle a lot. But that kind of intros me to the last iPad, the iPad Pro. And the Pro is the most expensive model that you can get, and it comes in two different sizes, so the 11-inch or the behemoth 12.9-inch, which is what I have. Pricing wise, it starts at $799 or $1099. This specific one has the maxed out storage, so you're pushing close to $1,500 for this specific machine. Do I think it's worth it? Especially for this kind of large iPad Pro, it's so hard to justify spending that kind of money. I do use it a lot with my MacBook Pro as a sidecar option. In the end, I find I use this the most as a glorified second screen when I'm, say, streaming soccer, when I'm editing over on my MacBook. And obviously, that is totally overkill for this. And it does have the most powerful chip. It actually has the same chip found in my MacBook Pro, the M1. But that's where the limitations of iPad OS really hinder this device. And I think a lot of people on Twitter agree, a lot of people in the tech space agree. You still can't do as much as you can with a laptop on Mac OS as you can on an iPad. I think the keynote from last year speaks most volumes. The biggest introduction, or the first thing that we saw with iPad OS, is you can now rock widgets on your iPad. I do not need to spend $1,500, or I don't need an M1 chip to rock widgets. Now, don't get me wrong, the iPad Pro is still a powerhouse, but I think it can only be a powerhouse for very specific users. If you're really into, say, high-end photography, yeah, using Photoshop, using Lightroom on this in really large file sizes, it makes sense. If you're an artist doing a lot of 3D rendering with the Apple Pencil, there is no tablet that comes close to this performance. I love the fact that the iPad Pro has ProMotion. That 120 Hertz is a huge upgrade. I can see that night and day with my eyes, and I love the fact that that's coming to the iPhone 13 Pro. It's just hard to justify to spend $1,000 to have some of those nice extra bonus options. Anyways, I'm sure some of you will disagree. I'm sure some of you have used the iPad Pro and absolutely love it. And if you do, just sound off in the comments what you use it for. Maybe I'm kind of missing a little sweet spot for this, but my recommended ones still fall in line with the two middle options, and I'm gonna give my vote of confidence for the iPad mini this year. I love the new design refresh, and I think I do have a bit of a soft spot for the mini. I used to have my OG mini, which I used when I backpacked across Europe when I was a younger guy, so I just love to see this small form factor, and I think it's just the most versatile and the most powerful. Maybe not spec-wise comparable to the M1 iPad Pro, but in actual day-to-day use, I think it rivals the most expensive iPad that you can get. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this vid. I hope it's a tad bit useful and you can now select which iPad you're eyeing. And like I said, the entry-level iPad is still a great option if you want to keep things on budget. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments, and I will catch the rest of you in one of my next vids. Peace!